I've been working on the railroad all the live long day.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Round Talbot with George. I'm George Ludington, your host, and today we're going to take a great picture back into the history of this whole area that we live in and what was done to bring about the society we have today and the businesses we have today. We're going to talk about the railroads and the impact they had on our area. So stay with us. We're going to start by me introducing you to Larry Denton. He's the head of the museum here in Easton, and he's going to lead the way into this. Stay with us on it because this is really important and it really does bring out a lot of unknown facts in the history of our town. Larry.
Thank you, George. The advent of trains to Talbot County was a monumental moment in the development of the history of this county. Isolated, terrible roads. Most people came here by boats. When the trains came, new towns sprung up, new businesses sprung up, and the people of the county were changed dramatically. I'd like to introduce to you my colleagues. To my right is Kathy Hill. Kathy is a board member of the society. She is an expert on the pictorial history of Talbot County. To her right is Jack Hall. Jack is another board member. He chaired our train committee, and he has led the effort to research the advent of trains to Talbot County.
Hi. I also like to mention that one of the reasons why I got interested in all the pictures in the collections of the Talbot Historical Society is because I do the Talbot Historical Society Facebook page. I'm the manager of that page. And this was an especially fun exhibit to do. So we're in the Neal House, the galleries of the Neal House and the Talbot Historical Society campus right now. And we're in the first room, which has the Clayton, Delaware to Oxford line. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that line, or I am, with you and telling you about the pictures that are right behind me.
Hi, I'm Jack Hall on the board of directors. Been working with Kathy on this exhibit. What has been a lot of fun to dig into the history of it is to gather stories from people who have collected stories themselves. We may, in the course of this session today, we may in fact make some misstatements, and I hope if you do, you'll contact us and say, look, that's not the way that place is pronounced, or that's not where it is, because that's the fun part. It's the exchange. That as the dry research, of course, has its role, but I love talking to people about what they remember.
Okay. Welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion and look into the history of this whole community. Kathy, this is fascinating. That's a lot of work. You did all this?
Well, we had a lot of fun putting together all of these pictures for these two rooms, which are the two major lines that came into Talbot County. Now, as we follow around the room from Delaware to Ridgely to, this is finally it reached Queen Anne in 1867. And when it reached Queen Anne, it was just put in the middle of a cornfield. So here's the town of Queen Anne now. We've had a lot of help with other people donating pictures to us. This is a perfect example here. This one is from a fellow named Danny Burris, who's a good friend of ours, and that's the Queen Anne station. This one is actually from the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, from the Dr. Lawrence G. Claggett collection of postcards. So it was fun to look for all of them. That's Queen Anne, that's the Queen Anne station. This is another version of it, and this is the Queen Anne station right here. Then it went on to Cordova. It arrived in Cordova in 1869. And at that time, it was just a little corner called Thimbletown. But they decided they wanted to name it something a little more interesting. So they took a geography book and they put their finger down in Cordova, Spain. by accident. So that's why it's called Cordova, in case you didn't know. So here's the station of Cordova.
Didn't know that.
And Cordova became really famous for having the largest packing company in the Talbot County. So that was in 1901. Then finally we made it to Easton. There was a debate in Easton, if you can see this map right here, about some people wanted to put the track right down the middle of Washington Street, which would have not been a good thing. So instead, the group that wanted it east of Washington Street won. So it's way over to this side, and the town grew over to Easton. And that brought a lot of tourists to our area. This is the Hotel Norris. It was first built as the Hotel Avon and burned to the ground in the 1940s and is now where the Tidewater Inn is. I love that picture of that. This is World War I. When the war was over, there was a celebration, and you know all these people had to come here by rail. These two pictures here are the blizzard of 1898, and in 2 days they had 29 inches of snow. So here they're just shoveling it by hand, and there they're kind of pushing through. And then this is the Brick Hotel, which was one of the first hotels that was built in 1815.
Where?
And that's on the corner of Federal Street and Washington Street. I love this one from the Maritime Museum, from Penny Claggett's collection. This is of all the Buicks lined up that were just unloaded, and they're going to be sold at Shanahan Wrightson Company, because they were the first distributors of Buicks in Talbot County. So that's what that one is. This is another one from the Maritime Museum, and this is the Hotel Norris. They've got the horse and buggy ready to take all the tourists to the Hotel Norris. Down here, Mrs. Holliday, H. Robbins Holliday, was one of our premier collection. It took our photographs, the best ones that we have here. And his wife was a teacher at the country school. So in this picture, she's taking her little students on a ride, and that's the Bullet. The Bullet was a gas-powered train at that time, when the big trains we didn't need them as much because they were phasing out. So they got these single-engine Bullets, and that's what that's taken in.
And the Bullet, it's the Bullet.
The main thing I want to say, though, is that Peggy Morey put this together. She's our collections manager. And she had the help of two wonderful summer interns who are college students, Lindy Mothershead and Aaron Pogue. And they did a fantastic job of putting this whole exhibit together.
It is fascinating, and the history is fascinating. And I think that Bullet is somehow over here, right? Yeah, there it is,
Yes,
on the bottom.
this line finally reached the end of the line, which is Oxford, in 1871. So this is the first line that came to Talbot County.
Okay, some of the traveling I've done with my wife around here, after we moved down here, I see at the end of the water there's heavy piers, or
Pier Street.
where they said that the trains could go there and then be put onto some of the ships.
That's in the next room. That's at Claiborne, Maryland.
Okay.
Our next line came from Baltimore to Claiborne to Ocean City.
Okay.
So if you arrived in Claiborne, it only took 2.5 hours and you could get to Ocean City, which sounds like a lot of fun to me, actually.
Actually, it does to me too.
And that continued. That made this whole area blossom as far as bed and breakfasts, hotels, until 1924, when they switched that line from Claiborne to the main port where they arrived from Baltimore is Love Point.
Okay.
So then that's when the Bullet train kind of came in, because we didn't need those trains going back and forth from Claiborne to Easton all the time.
Okay, great. Well, you are a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here and talk to you.
I love learning about the trains.
We can tell. It's really good. Okay, well, stay with us. We're going to move on, and I'll be back to you shortly. Hi, I'm George Ludington, and welcome back to the next edition of Around Talbot with George, and we are looking at the railroads and the impact they had on Easton and surrounding areas back in history, early history. We have with us today an expert. This is Jack Hall. Jack, good to have you with us.
Pleasure.
Appreciate your time on this. Jack is a board member for the Historical Society here in Easton, and he's a wealth of knowledge. Jack, take it.
All right. Ms. Hill mentioned that there were two lines running through Talbot County, and we have a map from 1950. Actually, some of the information on it appears to date before 1950, so I think when they updated this, as they may have done constantly, they in fact brought forward some of the old information. This has an updated, revised date of 1964. So, but the beauty of this map to us is that one of the things it shows is where the railroad lines ran. There's a legend down here so you can pick them out. We have colored them so that you will be able to follow them visually. The orange line, the line from Queen Anne to Oxford, I will refer to as the Oxford branch. In the end, both of these lines came to be controlled by the Pennsylvania Railroad, but whatever in their bureaucracy, they referred to this as the Oxford branch of the Delaware Railroad, and I'll refer to the Oxford branch, or the north-south line. This line from Claiborne through Easton, over to Tanyard, Preston, and Marydell, and Vienna, and on to Ocean City. It was called various things, but the most name that was most used was the Baltimore, Chesapeake, and Atlantic. And those of you who are railroad buffs will know that the locals disparaged that name by saying it meant black cinders and ashes. The railroad started as Kathy said, at about 1869 to come down towards Easton. And in fact, the dispute that she talked about delayed their getting into town. The first station, of course, is Queen Anne, as mentioned. Further down is Cordova. Now, there was a station here that the locals refer to as a chapel station. The documents refer to it as Woodland Station, but those of you who've driven to Cordova will notice that you drive by a semi-commercial site that is used by Mid-Atlantic Waste as a truck yard. That's where Woodland Station is. Getting closer into town, although it wasn't immediate, around Black Dog Alley was something called Fleming's Siding. And that was enough, a long enough siding to hold about 16 cars by somebody who knows how long cars were able to tell me. Finally, you come into Easton, and the dispute slowed things down. Now imagine bringing a line through town here. One of the things that would happen, I don't know whether you've ever been in a flood situation where the Eastern Utilities is in Lower Talbot County. I have. The police have said, you get out of here. But they would have had to have built a railroad bridge at that location. Get down around the hospital, going towards the Friends Meeting House. You'd have had to have another railroad because all that is now underground, all the stormwater. But it wasn't underground in 1869 when they were doing all of this. From Easton, of course, it went south towards Oxford, stopping at Trap Station in this location. And someone mentioned, said, well, why would they call it Trap Station when it was at least 6 miles from Trap? It was originally called Melson's, and I gather that didn't get much of appeal. Now, after about 10 years, they built another station in the area of Bailey's Neck, I'm a little bit high, called Landoff Station. And if you drive down the Oxford Road, off to where Bailey's Neck goes off to the right, Landoff Road goes to the left, and about a mile or so in, you will come to an area that has preserved its industrial commercial type nature, but of course has nothing to do anymore with railroads. Oxford, the line ends at Pier Street. So it was a little south of town. You'll see the documents referring to, or I think Dixon Preston refers to it as being south of town, and it was, because if you go down to Pier Street, you'll see it's a little bit off Morris Street. The The Claiborne to Ocean City line began here in Claiborne, and Mrs. Hill talked about the fact that you could get onto a steamboat that had nice accommodations. They had private baths on this thing in 1904. I mean, it just sounds like it was a very nice ride. But it did take them long to get to Claiborne. And from Claiborne, you had, going over towards Tanyard, you really did have what some people disparagingly refer to as a milk run. It wasn't used by the Ocean City Flyer. That had a straight shot through. That's how they got there in 2.5 hours. But for the convenience of the local people, you of course could stop at McDaniel, you could stop at St. Michael's, you could stop at Newcomb, you could stop at Kirkham, you could stop at Bloomfield Station. And if you had product that you needed to move, this would have meant that you could, within 3 miles, get your potatoes or tomatoes or whatever, milk cans to the station without having, by horse and buggy, which would limit how far you could go. Now, there was evidence of something over in the Dover Neck area, something called Turner Station, but it obviously wasn't a success, because you will see that when the line actually came through to get the deeds done, they mentioned the fact that, well, we're not going to bother taking in ground for Turner Station. But at about where Dutchman Lane ends today, there was a half acre out there next to a cannery called the Rich Bottom Cannery, and I have no idea what the purpose of being out there for the railroad was. I have no history of it, but there was something there, as you would think. You wouldn't think that they'd be serving all this area and just ignore this. I had, one of the fellows came through, picking up stories from people, said to me that he's taken his boat out there, and on low tide in the Choptank River, he has seen, and maybe it was when the water was clear, maybe it's fall or something, he has seen evidence of where the railroad trestles were anchored out there.
Let me ask you real quick while you're doing this, Fender. I had understood trap, one of the big things that trap was the produce, mainly, what do you call it, tomatoes and stuff coming out and being trained out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the Adams Packing Company was a very big deal in trap.
Right.
So they obviously...
I was told railroad, they loaded up the railroad cars.
Well, they had to load it up at Trap Station. You know, there was no railroad that went into Trap itself. And one of the reasons for why you wouldn't have run it through Trap, you're going to get to the Choptank River, and you're not going to go be at a place where it's not going to be accessible by steamboat as easily as Oxford. You run the train to Oxford, you've got nice deep water off of the Pier Street Marina, and you've got a kind of a harbor there. Whereas if you just head south from Trap, trying to cross or in some fashion have a terminus there, you're kind of more exposed, more open. It's not the place where you want to pull a boat in and tie it up and start loading cars. The people ask me, when did these lines start and when did they stop? And the starting point is kind of easy to tell. But the stopping point, you know, they just didn't lower the curtain and say, no more railroads. First, they would stop the passenger service, and then they would shorten the line. And one of the things that happened was a hurricane in 1933. Wiped out the railroad bridge that went from West Ocean City over to Ocean City itself.
Right.
At that point, by 1934, 33, 34, automobile traffic was beginning to compete with the railroads. You could get on when you wanted to get on, you could go where you wanted to go, you'd have to go to some place and then get a cab somewhere else. And the profitability of the line was no longer what it was, say, in 1904. So when that bridge went out, the Ocean City Flyer was no more. In fact, they pulled the operating train from Claiborne back to McDaniel. It didn't go out past the road that we all use now to go to Tillman. It didn't go that far any longer. The freight traffic continued to go out to McDaniel until the 1950s. There is at Chesapeake Landing.
Right.
There was a cannery there, Harrison Jarbo, I believe, and I suppose it would have been profitable for the train to run a car or two out there. I have a friend who told me about another friend who collected coal at McDaniel Station to deliver to customers in the area. But Claiborne was out by the 40s. McDaniel and the first thing, as I said, was the passenger traffic went off because passengers had a better way, a more convenient way. If you're moving heavy freight, though, a train is the way to go. If you're pulling across mountains, it's obvious, but even here, Waverly Press, for instance, used to get paper in. And if you've ever picked up a couple of reams of paper, that stuff gets heavy really quickly. And the gentleman who worked at Waverly Press says, yeah, we got shipments in just of paper. Now, the other thing that people always want to know is, where is this place where it crossed? Where's that location? Well, the location is at about where Willow Construction is, on South Aurora Street. If you go down South Aurora Street, you will notice that there is a right-of-way that goes through there. It is now used by the town of Easton for an underwater wastewater system, underground wastewater system. But they got it from the railroad, so it's following the railroad track. And that's very distinctive. The station itself is between Willow Construction and that right-of-way, the utility right-of-way that you see. When it was built, and we have some pictures around, you can see, there's somebody had a photograph of it, you can't see one building, and that's because it was way out of town. There are insurance maps that they were created, as Professor Mike Dixon explained, so that the insurer would know whether you were living next door, as he said, to a dynamite factory. The map of 1912 shows the train barely in Easton, shows the train barely off in the corner, coming down from the from the Tret Avon, and headed towards, you're headed east, but it's off the map. Just a little bit is off the map. They redid it in 1919, just updated it, if you will. And at that point, the railroad station was in town, and it shows on that sandboard map. But before that, it was in the boonies, and that's why you see these pictures where there's nothing around. I had a thought, and it went out of my head.
That's me. That's what I do. I'm totally fascinated. I just keep listening to this. Now I know you can find out where the trains were because they went rails to trails and all that. Yeah, and actually, I'm not sure they're used that much, but you can follow those trains. Or the tracking, though they've concreted it over.
The perfect contrary is from Easton, on the east side of Route 50, going up towards Queen Anne.
Right.
That track is still there.
It is.
And if you go to Queen Anne, of course, was a place where the two lines came together. So there was all sorts of connecting lines. Those tracks are still in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to walk around and say, okay, I can see where this one was and that one was.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of the name of the town. But there is a town, you keep following that track.
Yeah.
And you end up in
You talking about in Talbot County, Cordova, or are you talking about beyond Talbot County?
Beyond.
Okay, Ridgely, Greensboro, Goldsboro, Murrydale, Henderson.
Right, all of that. The track is there, but there's also another little part, and people take train rides there now. They take long rides, and you've got that car dealership. It's way over, but I can't think of the name of it. They have real track there, and people take rides on it. And I think people would enjoy it. Maybe it would just burn out. You know, people would do it once or twice and not want to ride a train again. But I think it's a great thing to do. I can remember riding on trains. In fact, we came in from Baltimore, my family and I, when I was a little kid, and we came into some place around here, and we spent a couple days there. They had these small hotels or something. Anyway, we spent a couple days there, and then we took the train back.
Well, following up on one of the things that Mr. Hill said, the steamboat line that got people to Claiborne had other places that they stopped, and they were advertising for traffic. Mm-hmm. So we have a page out of their book that shows places that you could stay and what it would cost you. Wade's Point, the Pasadena, and there's another one that escapes me right now, but I mean, $5 a week, you know, you could stay.
You're right. It's bringing back all the memories. I was a little kid when this happened, and it just always fascinated me. When I got older, I built a boat and sailboat and sailed up there. But this is really interesting. This is good.
Well, talking a little bit about the impact, Mr. Denton has mentioned the inconvenience of trying to travel by sail when in the summertime you get a slick cam and you aren't moving. The wintertime you're threatened of being thrown overboard. So the train all of a sudden gave you a dependable source. You didn't have to stop and rest the horses. It just kept chugging along. But when they describe Easton in these old documents, basically it was South Street to the south. That's where Trinity Church is, Christ Church, where Christ Church is. And on the north, it was North Street, which is just a block and a half or two above Goldsboro Street. That was town. The railroad comes through and a subdivision springs up around it. And that's going east-west, but obviously it grew going north-south. It was a tiny little town. We have a book here where it describes how you contact local companies to get things off of the train and then deliver them. And you see, Easton has about 3,700 people. You know, it's a small village, certainly. Things changed with opening up to the northern markets.
Okay, the train station is here, still here, and it's still operating. It's operating under somebody else's, as a business or something.
No, it's a center for tourism, I believe. I mean,
okay. Okay, and then, if you just stand there where the rails and trails are, you can actually see the depression of the track where it was. And it's fascinating to me. I would really like to see some kind of railroad come back.
Well,
I know it'll never happen. I know that.
Well, you'd have to tear up so much of the existing infrastructure, the highways. I took the train to New York for 3 years. Got on in Wilmington and rode up, and it was so very convenient. I was going to law school. I didn't have any money. I couldn't afford a car. And I mean, even if you could afford the car, you couldn't park it in the city.
That's right.
You know, at a train, I got around on the subway. I did have to find a way to get to Wilmington, and I had to find a way to get home from Wilmington. But I always bought a copy of the New Yorker magazine when I left New York. And by the time I got to Wilmington, I'd pretty much finished it. It was, it was very easygoing sort of a way to get around.
Now, I worked in Washington, D.C. and for the federal government, and we'd run out and we'd catch the train because I lived in Baltimore. And we'd catch the train right there, what do they call that station? But
Union Station.
Union Station. And the train take us into Baltimore. And it was...
That's a long commute.
It is. It is. And I did it for 3 years, and then I realized I got tired of that commute. But because it was, I don't know, it was different. But it's just fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun to do.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, when it was so hot and humid here, I was talking about railroads with a friend, and I said, can you imagine what that poor fireman would have been going through in this kind of heat? Because there he is shoveling coal into a furnace. It's not an easy job.
It's hot. It's a lousy job, even when it's cold. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
come see this. Take the time, come to the museum, take a look, and meet the people here. A lot of them will still be here, and see the posters and all the work that went into this history. You'll enjoy it. Believe me, you'll enjoy it. You can't get enough of it. I don't care who you are. You'll love it. Thank you for watching. Thank all of you for bringing this to life. I'm George Ludington, and we'll see you later.
I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morn. Can't you hear the captain shouting?